morning. This is Daybreak, and thank you for making time for the broadcast. The hashtag on X is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. It's Friday, and here on the broadcast we take the account of young Kenyans as to their reflections and perspectives to what's happening across the country. Call it the state of affairs in Kenya. And overwhelmingly, the attention of the country is on the proceedings at the moment ongoing at the Bomas of Kenya, where the National Dialogue Committee continues to get the views and the submissions of Kenyans, including yesterday and the explosive return of the Cherera 4. We'll talk more about that in the papers and also in the news review. And later on the broadcast, it's going to be Gospel Friday edition, and DJ Ijiji will be in the house. He will tell us more about his compact list of what's forthcoming. DJ, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
What do we expect?
Expect great music. Obviously, you know, it's a gospel edition, end month.
Yeah.
What we usually do is we pay tithe.
It's the last Friday.
Last Friday of the month. And we have a great artist coming through. Rafton will also be coming. And so he's a legend in the gospel music ministry and industry. And I'm looking forward to that. I hope you are too.
Yes. and I did a little level of a song.
Okay.
Mungu Baba.
Okay. Can you sing it for us?
Badai. And of course, it's at a time when inspiration is needed because of the hard economic times in the country, and that godly sort of relaxing the minds of Kenyans. And of course, we expect many more in that lineup that you're going to be giving our viewers later from 8 a.m. He will be with you for an hour up to 9, that is. And keep your comments coming. The hashtag on X is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Let's begin with a look at the front pages of the publications, and the attention is on the Bomas of Kenya. The Daily Nation says 67 constituencies likely going to be scrapped and MPs to lose seat. This is the boundary crisis. An extra 40 units are facing the axe as well. That story is further highlighted on pages number 4 and 5 of the publication. It follows the submissions yesterday made before the Senior Counsel Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka and Kimani Ichung'wah-led National Dialogue Committee. The population quota is derived from dividing the total population by 290 constituencies. At the time of the first review, the population quota was 133,138. And given the growth in the number of Kenyans, the threshold in the upcoming review has risen to 164,014. Among the constituencies listed on the front page include Mvita, Kilome, Budalangi, Othaya, Tetu, Voi, Mwatate, all among the other long list of constituencies that are likely going to be the current 27 which are protected, and 67 MPs, says the paper, likely to lose their seats. A separate bid for the reduction of constituencies to 100 was made yesterday by the former Attorney General, that is Professor Githu Muigai, before the National Dialogue Committee. Also on the front page, how to tame the runaway living costs in the country. The Kenya Institute of Public Policy Research and Analysis, a state think tank, has proposed measures to cushion Kenyans from the harsh economic times, including a reduction of value-added tax to make cooking oil cheaper and the gradual elimination of subsidies to ease the burden on consumers. That story is on page number 7. Even as the government lines up measures to lessen the stress on the high cost of living and the squeezing of the household budgets across the country. Cherera 4 say we were forced to quit. That story is on page number 6, and the accounts yesterday given by Juliana Cherera, Francis Wanderi and Justice Nyang'aya, who yesterday appeared before the National Dialogue Committee and said that the commissioners who stood their rejection of the presidential election results and pouring water on the unverifiability of what they said were the presidential election outcome. Rai family millions frozen, bank account locked over row. That story is on page number 12 of the publication, and a further analysis of the Iqbal Rai, who has accused Absa Bank of irregularly removing him as the signatory for Rai Investment Limited account, and what appears to be a continuing happenstances of the Rai family and the financial issues. Also on the front page of the Standard newspaper, it continues to highlight the high cost of living in the country and says, brace yourself for the tough times that lie ahead in the country. That is the call to Kenyans. And specialists are warning that the country will experience economic downturn and are advising the government and the public to invest in agriculture and related sectors to ride out of the storm. These include the revitalization of the agriculture sector in the country, which accounts for more than 20% of the country's GDP, containing inflation, and which they say is having pressure on the country's monetary policy, sustainable debt, and also diversifying the export products to make the country resource-mobilized, export-oriented economy. That story is further highlighted and further expounded on pages number 2 and 3. Election ghost comes alive in Ruto. Raila talks at the Bomas of Kenya, and yesterday's accounts that were given by the Cherera Four, Justice Nyangaya, Francis Wanderi and Juliana Cherera, said that they did not agree with the outcome of the presidential election and that there was what appeared to be a center of power in the results transmission during the presidential election results at the Bomas of Kenya, which is the National Tallying Center gazetted by the IEBC. Also on the front page, up top, ex-Kenya Bureau of Standards boss forfeits half of his wealth in probe. That story is on page number 10. Opinion split on new KCSE grading by the Ministry of Education, and that was made by the CS Ezekiel Machogu on page number 6. And Kenyans cautious on the AFCON bid win. That's on sports pages number 35 and 36 of the publication following the win and the green light given to Kenya, Tanzania and Uganda to host the 2027 Africa Cup of Nations. In the East African region, the joint bid will be in 4 years' time, and the commitment thereafter given by President William Ruto and his counterparts in Tanzania and Uganda to host the Continental Showpiece event in 4 years' time, and the announcement which came from the Egyptian capital, Cairo. This is Daybreak, and thank you for staying with us. The hashtag on Twitter is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikandid. We begin at the Bomas of Kenya, where the Cherera Four, the four former commissioners of the IEBC, made an explosive return and appeared before the National Dialogue Committee, chaired by Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka and Kimani Ichung'wah. The events which happened were on the election results which happened, and they said that the four commissioners rather said, and throwing a wide blanket on the of doubt on the credibility of last year's election, with claims that the outcome declared by then chairperson Wafula Chebukati were never tabulated as required. The session with the National Dialogue Committee, Juliana Cherera, Irene Masit, who appeared before the committee virtually from remote locations, while Justice Nyangaya and Francis Wanderi appeared physically. And as Chemutai Goin tells us in the following report, the former IEBC chairperson Wafula Chebukati and Commissioners Professor Abdi Yakub Gulie and Boyamolo declined the committee's invitation to appear before it.
Thank you very much. Until the announcement.
A question to
At the Bomas of Kenya, the ghosts of the disputed 2022 general election were literally coming back home. Bomas, which was the election headquarters of the then bitterly divided IEBC, is now home to the National Dialogue Committee, before which smoky exchanges ensued.
Commissioner Wanderi, what you're saying is not a small matter.
It is not a small
You have a whole nation to deal
here.
with here.
Yes.
How come you are not able to prove to the Supreme Court, show any evidence where what the chairman announced and what was verified was invariance? Why didn't you prove that to the highest court of the land? Then you come to bring it here.
Mheshimiwa Mbalile, with due respect, we are not saying we were right and everybody else was wrong. We are just explaining the procedure the way it happened. Where there are flaws within that procedure, then the committee will recommend the legal action to be taken. That's all we are here for.
Appearing before the dialogue team, former IEBC commissioners Juliana Cherera, Irene Masit, Justice Nyangaya and Francis Wanderi called for an audit of the 2022 presidential election results, saying due process was not followed by the chairman Wafula Chebukati in tallying and announcing the results.
on the issue of tally. This is what the Supreme Court says, that the chairperson on his part did not make matters any better by maintaining a stoic silence, even as things appear to be falling apart. And I asked you a simple question, which I want you to confirm and explain to us, that did you participate in the tally?
Do you have a single incident where a form was verified on the floor, confirmed by party agents to be the results as announced at the polling stations, because the party agents were confirming against their agents' results? They confirm it, you announce, for instance, or Commissioner Ishomo announces. The form goes to Chairman Chebukati for tallying, and from the final tally, or as the tally, because the tallies are there on the portal.
Up to now, we don't know the results, and it's very important that we audit these results. It's very, very important, because when we audit and even made open to everybody, even those people who have been elected and who lost as MPs, and even others, they will know their results, because I want to say this was not tallying, there was no tallying, there was no verification, it was just, it is not, I don't know what to say about it as a commission.
Did you have time to investigate the efficiency of the Secretariat? It looks like the chairman was working with the Secretariat to the exclusion of the rest of you.
The chairman was issuing press statements alone without consulting and bringing all the commissioners to speak on what was happening on the ground.
The commissioners saying they were targeted for standing their ground that Chebukati, Gulie and Molo mismanaged the election.
The Shelela 4 were forced to resign. It was never our intention to resign. And therefore, we would want to ask that the reason why the Shelela 4 were removed from the office is because they questioned the process that the chairman used to declare the results.
Let's allow an in-depth closure to this matter, because only then the country can move forward. We wish to have a very independent and strong commission. If it is not for us, it will be for the generations to come. We want the next generation of commissioners at IBC be people that will be handled with integrity that it deserves, and their voice will not be shut down, because as commissioners, we were there in the kitchen. We know what happened. Some of these things need to be spoken in a safe space.
Cherera and Masit indicated they now leave out of the country out of fear for their lives. They fought back tears while narrating their tribulations, Masit saying she has been branded a traitor and forced to flee the country. Cherera on her part saying her young family had bore the brunt of the political lynching. Chemutai Goin, Citizen TV.
Former Attorney General Githu Muigai has recommended the reduction in the number of constituencies and counties, citing a huge burden on the taxpayer. While giving his perspective on the boundaries delimitation process to the National Dialogue Committee at the Bomas of Kenya, the former Attorney General said it will be cost-effective to have a lean parliament. As Benkiroi reports, several other groups, including Amnesty International and the Registrar of Political Parties, also made their submissions.
Maybe on a light note, is that how...
When he took to the floor of the Bomas of Kenya before the 10-member National Dialogue Committee, former Attorney General Githu Muigai proposed a reduction in the number of constituencies, as well as scrapping off a few political positions by scaling down the number of counties that have forced the government to make excessive expenditures.
We have too many people in Parliament. We have too many constituencies. so that we should be reducing constituencies, not increasing.
The conversation on boundaries comes at a time when Kuria East Member of Parliament Marwa Kiyatama tabled a bill seeking to amend the constitution. The bill proposes to increase the number of counties to 52 from the current 47 capped by the constitution.
We have too many counties. We should reduce counties, not increase counties. They are costing us a lot of money, and quite a number of them are not viable.
Githu Muigai also advocated for mechanism to enforce party loyalty. The former Attorney General suggesting that elected officials should maintain fidelity to the party under which they were elected, and crossing the floor should result in the loss of one's seat.
You commit to that program that our party.
The registrar of political parties, Anne Nderitu, on her part, proposed that the political parties fund be entrenched in the constitution. Nderitu saying the move would ensure Parliament allocates the required funds to political parties.
It is true that we have never realized the 0.3% since the inception of the fund in 2007. But I want to note that the fund has been growing over time.
Nderitu submitted to the NDC that sanctions should be brought into the Political Parties Act to maintain fidelity of party members.
The law is very clear. To us, once somebody has been elected on a particular party, there must be, if you want to move, then there must be the required regulations and laws on how you move from one political party to another.
Amnesty International, through its director Irungu Horton, emphasized the need for the NDC to prioritize independent investigations into unlawful use of lethal police force, extrajudicial executions, enforced disappearances, and the significant delays in achieving justice for those seeking police accountability.
Crisis started at the point that the police refused to accept notifications, that they began to intimidate and arrest organizers, and wherever protesters gathered non-violently, they dispersed them with tear gas, rubber bullets, and as the months continued, live weapons.
Ben Kirui, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
The Anglican Church of Kenya has called out President William Ruto's Kenya Kwanza administration, accusing it of engaging in rhetorics and excuses instead of putting deliberate efforts towards the implementation of its campaign pledges. In their pastoral message to the nation led by Archbishop Jackson Ole Sapit, the church leaders faulted the government's shareholder notion, saying that all Kenyans should be treated equally as the election period is long gone. Hassan Mugambi has the details of that story.
After a 3-day prayer and reflection meeting by the Provincial Synod of the Anglican Church, the leadership of ACK weighed in on the performance of the Kenya Kwanza government 1 year on.
Our honest observation as a church is that there is more of rhetoric and excuses than conscious efforts to take practical implementation. We urge the government to go beyond promises and lip service and embrace practical programs to alleviate sufferings of Kenyans.
The Anglican Church leaders faulted political leaders for likening the government to a shareholding company where those that supported Kenya Kwanza stand to benefit, calling for equality in appointments and regional development.
A session of public appointments in already divided nation, Kenyans deserve equal opportunities and the treatment regardless from where they come from.
With the bipartisan talk underway, Sapit discouraged political leaders from speaking against the process, adding that such utterances are likely to divide the country further.
We call upon the teams involved to embrace the spirit of good faith during the talks and to provide ways that can help the country address deeply rooted systemic issues which have polarized this nation.
On the issue of the skyrocketing cost of living, the clergy called on the government to devise means other than taxation that can help generate revenue.
Excessive taxation is detrimental not only to the spirit of the investment, but it is also a demotivating factor to the people who work hard to make a living. The high increase in taxation, notably the VAT added on petrol, is a source of concern for all. we believe it is imperative for our government to appreciate the fact that Kenyan citizens are already stretched to their limits.
The clergy who represent the top leadership of the Anglican Church also called for more funding for healthcare, asking the Kenya Kwanza administration not to play dice with the lives of Kenyans, as well as demanding that the government addresses the issue of drug abuse across the country. The religious leaders also calling for practical mitigation measures against the El Nino rains expected to pound the region. Hassan Mugambi, Citizen TV.
5 people have died and 3 others were injured in an accident at Mailitisa near Namanga. The accident involved a private vehicle and a motorcycle. 3 people who were in the vehicle died on the spot, while 2 succumbed to their injuries at the Namanga Health Center. The rider of the motorcycle and 2 pillion passengers sustained injuries and are receiving treatment at the same facility. Bodies of the deceased were moved to Kajiado Referral Hospital mortuary. The vehicle was heading from Nairobi to Namanga with the occupants during the accident. The government says it has put in place adequate measures to mitigate the effects of the El Nino rain set to start mid-October. In a stakeholders meeting chaired by Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, the government has estimated that it requires more than 10 billion shillings to manage the effects of El Nino, especially in the arid and semi-arid areas. Stephen Leto has that report.
El Nino rains are said to be on the horizon and the skies will open starting the second week of October. The El Nino rains, projected to be stronger than the 1997 deluge, will run until the end of December. Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua chaired a multi-agency team seeking to mobilize resources to be used in handling the effects of heavy rains.
We do propose that we have proper coordination, stakeholder participation, and as we go on, each sector to prioritize possible response in terms of prime urgency.
And out of the 23 counties that we have, we already have an estimation of about 8 billion shillings. You can imagine by the time the others come, we'll probably be at 15 billion shillings that will be required to fund this El Nino preparedness and response activities.
DP Gachagua, however, told agencies involved not to take advantage of the El Nino rains to drown taxpayers' money in floods.
We are not preparing to respond to the El Nino expected disaster. Rather, we are consolidating and refining coordination strategy for mitigation. Unlike the past, we are saving lives and livelihoods before tragedy strikes.
The government has projected that the El Nino rains may affect the national examinations scheduled for end of October. Defense Cabinet Secretary Aiden Duale told the gathering that he has put the military on standby and the Air Force will help in the distribution of national exams in areas worst affected by the unexpected heavy downpour.
In the event the Ministry of Education, when they are conducting their exams, some areas will not be accessible. We have our aviation section that is ready. Our equipments are ready.
It is very important for us, Kenyans, to take measures to reduce the negative impact of these rains. That is why we are appealing to those living in low-lying and flood-prone areas to move to higher grounds.
The gathering at the Deputy President official residence called for immediate unclogging of city drainage with concerns of a ticking time health hazard. The Council of Governors want KEMSA to supply medicine to the local health centers before the onset of El Nino.
If KEMSA is giving us 2 weeks turnaround time, the drugs are at 60%. If we don't capitalize KEMSA, how do we expect KEMSA to give us drugs within less than a week and deliver last mile?
Treasury Cabinet Secretary Njuguna Ndungu has been tasked to report back to a technical committee next Tuesday to outline the availability of resources to be used in the El Nino mitigation measures.
So we are ready. The only person who was supposed to give direction properly here, and I can see he's not straight, is the Minister for Finance. You know, it's good we say the truth. From Ranger Red Cross, from the Governor, Chair of Council of Governors, from Minister Miano, Minister Susan, everybody who spoke here, they have the tools.
Stephen Letos, Citizen TV.
It's now emerging that missteps by the executive arm of the government could be the cause of the crisis in the education sector, which it has fallen into following the National Assembly's move to halt the reforms in the sector. Concerns raised by the Teacher Service Commission and other stakeholders over the implementation matrix of the recommendations without the input of key stakeholders and Parliament has been affirmed by the National Assembly. Brenda Wanga now reports of frantic efforts that are undertaken to salvage the reforms.
A meeting between Parliament's Education Committee and senior education sector officials, including the Teacher Service Commission, made this month in Mombasa, threw open the door to accord a glimpse of the intrigues that preceded the presentation of the final report of the Presidential Working Party on education reforms to the President. The TSC, in its presentation to the lawmakers, accused the Working Party of denying the Commission the opportunity to have its input in the report before the final drafting. The National Assembly, in halting the report's implementation, cited the failure of the Ministry of Education to follow due process before beginning implementing them. The teachers' employers have raised concerns about some of the recommendations and the impact on the constitutional powers and independence of the Commission. The Teacher Service Commission told the committee that despite submitting a memorandum and engaging a committee of the Working Party on the 18th of November last year, the Working Party failed to consider the Commission's input on critical matters involving the teachers' service. As a result, the TSC says the outcome of the Working Party, if implemented, will limit, interfere, and/or out the Commission's constitutional mandate. To an extent, the Commission will lose its independence. It also states that by moving to implement the recommendations, the party proposes to take away key mandates and functions of the Commission underpinned by the Constitution through amendment of the statute law.
The secondary has been very, very seamless.
Among the recommendations of the Working Party once implemented but that are opposed by the Commission include the move to have the Ministry of Education oversee the retooling of teachers who graduated before this year, the setting of entry standards of teaching service, the establishment of a comprehensive school management system that places pre-primary management in the same category as primary and secondary schools, and the harmonization of teachers' performance evaluation with that of the rest of the civil service. The TSC also faulted the recommendation to discontinue the categorization of schools into national, extra-county, county and sub-county to career pathways and the reduction of learning areas in primary, junior and senior schools, stating that this moves extended beyond the Commission's mandate and would lead to redistribution of teachers and additional financial burdens on schools. The Commission says that some of these recommendations should have waited to undergo the necessary legal amendments. They are not the first ones to have raised the alarm over what stakeholders have called the hurried implementation of the Working Party's recommendation.
Receive this report, subject it through the further processing, definitely it should be tabled in Cabinet to be a white paper as a policy document and all that, and taken to Parliament for debate and discussions and to see where legislations need to be done, amendments which need to be done and all that. Those things have not been done and yet they are being implemented. So That's why we say that it's being done in a hurry, but it's leaving lots of casualties.
PS Education Belio Kipsang, on behalf of the Cabinet Secretary for Education, told the stakeholders meeting in Mombasa that the ministry had already put in place the steering committee, the legal committee, and the departmental committees that were working to produce a sessional paper for forward transmission to Parliament. Brenda Wanga, Citizen TV.
The Senate has described Turkana County as a crime scene embedded in multi-billion shillings corruption through scandalous stalled projects in the county effected by the county government of Turkana. The county governor Jeremiah Lomurkai told the parliamentary watchdog committee inspecting the stalled projects in the county that the financial discrepancies were affected by the leadership of his predecessor Josephat Nanok, calling on investigative agencies to unearth the alleged corruption and bring those culpable to book. Seth Olale on the Senate Mashinani with this report from Lodwar in Turkana County.
Jengo hili ambalo linafaa kuwa ofisi rasmi ya gavana wa kaunti ya Turkana.
Okay, we'll get back to that story on the corruption allegations raised in the county of Turkana. The top leadership of Kenya Prison Service will no longer be outsourced from other security agencies. Instead, the correctional facilities leadership will be handed to career prisons officers to ensure a clear career progression path. Speaking in Parliament when he appeared before the National Assembly's Committee on National Cohesion and Equal Opportunities, Interior Cabinet Secretary Professor Kithure Kindiki said the outsourcing of the top management of security agencies was demoralizing career officers in the prison service, which he said is currently headed by the Commissioner General John Warioba, a retired military general.
So I've made it clear, this is the last time we're going to have an officer outside the Kenya Prison Service leading the Kenya Prison Service, because it demoralizes the officers who we recruit every year if they cannot aspire to rise to the top and so forth. So we are working on that area on succession management, career progressions, promotions, and much of it has been addressed in the Presidential Task Force report. It's only that I didn't want to preempt it.
The Kenya Women Parliamentary Association, KEWOPA, is now seeking to criminalize violence meted on women during pregnancy, childbirth and after childbirth. Githunguri MP Gathoni wa Mushomba has presented a motion to the National Assembly that seeks to amend health-related laws to make it an offence to abuse women during the process of childbearing and offer stiffer penalties for those found culpable of engaging in obstetric violence. Brenda Wanga has that report.
When Abigail went to deliver her baby at a health facility, she did not expect to be forced into delivery via cesarean section. She had indeed planned and prepared for a natural birth.
And then they tell you your baby will die because you don't sign that paper. You will sign 1 million papers because you want your baby. And they pushed me to a corner so badly. And I was personally, and they made me feel I was the only one remaining between me and holding my baby.
She had just undergone what is now being described as a form of obstetric violence manifested as forced procedures. Obstetric violence is a form of gender-based violence exercised by those in charge of healthcare for pregnant persons accessing services during pregnancy, childbirth and postpartum. In Kenya, a survey conducted by the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights indicates that 20% of women have undergone this kind of violence that manifests through non-confidential care at 8.5%, non-dignified care at 12%, neglect or abandonment at 14.3%, non-consensual care at 4.3%, physical abuse at 4.2%, and detainment at healthcare facilities after birth at 8.1%.
And you know, most of these times when these things happen to us, we don't even know that it's a violence against women. We just think it's something that is happening to all of us. And so I'm also joining my colleagues to say maybe the numbers that we have there is not the right numbers.
OBV is physical and verbal violence. We have had very serious verbal abuses. Personally, I'm a victim, and I know so many women here will confess that they have been verbally abused during labor or during childbirth.
Let's not limit violence to physical assault. There may be utterances that we utter to people that cause more harm than even the physical attack that we do.
Obstetric violence is said to be facilitated largely by doctors and nurses, midwives, spouses, the general public, the media, and the hospital support staff. However, medical practitioners say they aren't entirely to blame for the cases of OBV.
Let's also look at the context of the environment. If I am 3-4 nurses with 20, 30 patients, can I really optimize the kind of care I would provide? It's highly unlikely. And yet everyone is looking for individualized care.
But to come out with the legal framework, come up with the ways of how data is going to be collected, and to call upon all the women leaders, both at parliament and executive, that this is an issue that is right within our homes.
The movement to address this form of violence is expected to culminate in stiffer penalties for those who are found to have facilitated the violation of women at their most vulnerable. Brenda Wanga, Citizen TV.
You're watching Daybreak, and thank you for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. It's Friday. We take the account of young Kenyans as to their accounts and view perspectives as to what's happening in the country. Of significance are the proceedings before the National Dialogue Committee at the Bomas of Kenya, where the dark cloud of Kenya's election in 2022, as ever it has been in every electoral cycle, continues to hang over the country. Yesterday, 4 former commissioners appeared before the committee and saying that they can't verify the outcome of the presidential election. That and much more, including the high cost of living in the country and generally the state of the nation, here on the broadcast. And it's a view that we take from young Kenyans here on the broadcast every Friday as to what they think should be done to course correct some of the failures, be it political, economical, and social, for their counties equally important, for they make up a lion's share of Kenya's demography. That discussion will be on and up here on the broadcast after the break on Daybreak. Stay tuned.